The story here, it's Jesus and the rich young man, the rich dude. So it's Jesus and Jeff Bezos, basically. And he says, what can I
Hi.
do to gain eternal life? The first Sunday in Lent. We are here already. Adriene, you aren't preaching. Do you want to tell
I'm
everybody
not.
who is?
You are.
Ah.
I'm actually preaching. I'm just preaching somewhere else.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm really excited that you'll be in the pulpit the first Sunday of Lent.
Wait, so you are preaching this text?
I am actually preaching Mark 1, which is so
Oh,
funny. So I'm preaching at a church that uses the Revised Common Lectionary, and they are at the baptism, which is great because that sermon I didn't get to preach that I was going to call U-turns welcome or something like that because it's about repenting. I'm going to get to preach that text. So that's cool.
well, okay. Well, let's stick with the narrative lectionary because that's
Yes,
Riverside's jam these days. Everyone
absolutely.
who wants to see what you're doing in the RCL, that's totally worth looking up to. But the narrative lectionary, it brings us still in the Gospel of Mark. We've been making our way through, and we are at Mark chapter 10. This is verses 17 to 30 something. Uh, and the story here, it's Jesus and the rich young man, the rich dude. So it's Jesus and Jeff Bezos, basically. And he says, what can I
Hi.
do to gain eternal life? And Jesus says, follow all these commandments. And the dude says, I've done all that. And then Jesus says, sell everything you have and give it to the poor. And Jeff is like, I don't want to do that. And then he walks away. And then there's a bit more. It's hard for a camel. Camel can't go through the eye of a needle. Nothing's impossible with God. First shall be last, last shall be first. There's some good handles in this for a preacher. So it should be fun.
There are some good handles. I think one of them that stuck out to me, and I'm not at all trying to be mean to Jeff Bezos, though I have been in the past. It does say a young man, and no shade on Jeff Bezos. He's not particularly young. I mean, we get the impression that this person may be in their 20s, that maybe they've inherited from their family or from some kind of stroke of luck, have just kind of walked into this easy life, or maybe always had an easy life. And I don't know Jeff Bezos' origin story. But there is something, when I read a commentary, actually by our friend and colleague Claudio Carvalles across the street at Union Theological Seminary, he talks about this wealth being such a part of this man's identity. And then you get down in the text, and I don't know if you're digging into this, where Peter says something like, we've given up everything to follow you. And that just got me thinking, and I wonder if you might want to maybe talk about just identity and how hard it is to give up things. Peter's saying we've given up everything, but do we really give up everything? Wealth, I think, is an easy thing to point at. And then, of course, lets a lot of us off the hook. I'm not Jeff Bezos, but are we what Peter says? Have we given up mother, father, sister, brother, everything? Yeah.
Well, I'm titling the sermon "Giving Up," so we're already on the right wavelength
Oh,
here. And to
okay.
me, that's hitting on all the themes because you see that in the text, giving up wealth as this criteria that Jesus gives this individual, but also this is the first Sunday in Lent, and so in the season of Lent, people often give things up as a spiritual practice, and the concept behind that. Uh, and I think a title called "Giving Up" is kind of fun because it sounds like I'm giving up, I'm done, I'm throwing it in, which is kind of what this kid does when Jesus says, "Here's what you got to do." He's like, "I can't, I'm out, I give up. I'm not going to make it into this way that you're talking about, Jesus." Um, but yeah, it's easy to just ask, or have we done that? What are we willing to give up? Uh, and what does it cost us for our own way of following Jesus? This makes me think of just, was it this past week with the, take up your cross and follow me? That's a big giving up to be a part of the way of Jesus. So Mark is continuing that theme to some extent. There's a cost to this journey we are on. And I think Lent especially invites us to kind of practice that cost in some way as we follow Jesus towards Holy Week, towards Good Friday, and ultimately through Easter and beyond.
I wonder, Jim, if you talk about the cost, because I know we try to soften and soft pedal. Uh, well, did Jesus mean everything? Really everything? How are we supposed to live? Because of course we go there. What about the fact that I've got to pay my rent, or
Yeah.
I really love my family, my children. I kind of want to keep them around. How are you thinking about, I don't know, inviting people into that, at least that conversation with ourselves over the next 6 weeks of Lent?
Yeah, so we're gonna talk a bit in the sermon about just the practice of giving things up for Lent and why and how, and this is not just New Year's resolution part two. This is not just personal improvement. Like this is an intentional spiritual practice. Like so, doing this should have a cost, but the point of it is to it's connected to Jesus in the wilderness for 40 days, him fasting for 40 days. So there's this sense of embodying the experience Jesus would have had to some extent. Not saying people should fast from food for 40 days. If you are, power to you. Talk to your nutritionist first. But what are you giving up? What is it? I live in the Midwest now. I drive a car here and there to take my kids to daycare and things. And I'm going to do a thing for Lent that I did ages ago, back when I was, 20 something. And I like to give up 5 miles an hour for Lent. So I drive 5 miles below the speed limit wherever I go as an intentional practice to slow myself down. And then it's this discipline. So for me, does it cost me something? Kind of, but not really. I'm not going to lose time. My kid's going to get to daycare 20 seconds later than he would have or something. But it does have an impact on me, and it's an intentional thing. So there's like the giving up for Lent practice. And then there's the particularity in this text about giving up your money. Like give everything you have to the poor and follow me. And that's where I think, at least how I see this in the commentaries I've been looking at, Jesus is talking to a particular person. He's not telling everybody to give up everything they have. In this sense, he's talking to a rich person, a person for whom their wealth might be a stumbling block between them and this, expansive love of God for all people, especially those who need it the most. So I think this is the tax the rich message. This isn't the widow's mite. That's a whole other story of this woman who gives everything she has. But Jesus isn't prescribing what everyone should do. He's describing what this wealthy person should do. So that's where I think this is the message for Jeff Bezos. And then the other thing I'm doing, I'm showing all my sermon cards here. The things I'm exploring, I'm finding a list of the top 100 wealthiest people in America. And I'm going through and I'm organizing it based off of gender and race. And so I don't have all the data fully tabulated yet, but I'm basically trying to support my hunch that most of the wealthy people in America are white men. That's my hunch. The data, I got to go through it still. And that's where I'm thinking, here we are in the middle of Black History Month. Here we are a couple weeks away from Women's History Month. And just looking at the people for whom this message is for, and how particularly those who inherit wealth, who just have it handed to them, who are able to navigate the system with the greatest ease because of their white male privilege, who then is left out of opportunity. So those are the people that Jesus is saying, give up all you have. Give it to the poor, because your wealth is getting in the way of the work of God, or it's becoming this idol between you. And people will look at the whole camel eye of the needle thing, and there's a couple nuances here. Some people like to say this story of, oh, it's this door, and it was this door in the city that was a small door and a big door, and the camel had to hunch over to go through it, and therefore it means, you can't be burdened by your wealth, but you can still make it through. Now that's a really nice story, but we didn't hear that interpretation until about 1000 Common Era, so 1,000 years after the Gospels. It's a very prevalent one, but there's no archaeological data or any sort of data to support that being the thought when Jesus would have said this. And it could very well be that what Jesus is saying is a camel cannot go through the eye of the needle. It is impossible. A wealthy person who's obsessed with their money cannot make it into the kingdom of God. Those two things do not compute. You can't do it. And then Jesus goes on to say, but nothing is impossible with God. So it's just, there's a lot going on. And that's a bit of the pre-sermon soup that I'm trying to sift through here.
I'm really glad you mentioned Black History Month, because another thing I think that is top of mind for a lot of our members and folks around the world is also Lunar New Year. And just thinking about Asian culture and the communal nature of Asian culture, even the communal nature of language, where there's no sense in some of the languages of a sense of mine and of ownership, but rather a sense of a collective, like our house, our family, rather as opposed to my house and my family. So this giving up also just got me thinking that perhaps the giving up really isn't a loss because it is a giving up for the communal
Yeah.
sustenance and sustaining, as opposed to my own personal, I'll never be able to spend all of this in my lifetime. But I guess another question I have for you is, what then will the message be for those of us who are not Jeff Bezos or don't have a lot of money? Because you said something about the money is the thing that's keeping this particular person from a more expansive knowing of God. Might that be, I don't know, translated for those of us who don't have money but maybe have something else keeping us from expansive connection?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly the question. I don't want anyone to feel shamed or guilted. Oh, I got to give my whatever meager, savings account up and just, live with nothing. It's like, no, 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 no. That the point of this is not give all your money to the church. Like, if you want to make a donation, great. But I think the what you're hinting at is exactly what we should all be, intuiting from this. What are those things that consume me and get in the way of this way of God that I am called or compelled or invited to be a part of? And how can I, eliminate those, sacrifice those, get rid of those so that they can be, maybe that thing can be used actually in a wider breadth for all of us. And that's where, again, I gotta still walk some of the tightrope of this sermon still to put all the pieces together. So join us to see how it actually comes together. But I also am planning on leaning a bit into our Lent theme, love poured out, and this nature of, Jesus gives up himself. God's self is given up for us. Love is poured out. Now that doesn't mean that the love is just tossed away, like it's gone down the garbage disposal, but it's poured out in a way so we all have the love, rather than it just being a proprietary thing for one expression. It's like, no, we all need this. So I might talk about some geese a little bit and how geese will, give up first place to go to the back so they can all fly together. Thank you, our colleague Reverend Mira, for that metaphor. So there's a whole lot in my head here. I'm in my running gear because I need to go on a few more long runs to really put these pieces of the sermon together.
Absolutely, absolutely. I really love what you said, the reminder about our theme, which is love poured out. It just made me think of a friend of mine, a very devout Presbyterian woman who happens to be Korean, and Korean Presbyterians are some of the most devout folks I know. She often will talk about how we just give. We are trained and taught that you give to the church, and not just to the church, but also to the community. And I will say that she is a person of substantial means, and was a huge giver to a church that I served. And I remember her saying, Reverend Adriene, I can't give it away fast enough. It's like the more I give away, the more comes back to me. Sometimes it comes back as money. Sometimes it comes back as opportunity. This is a woman who owned 3 businesses, multiple properties, and would just write checks to the church, to other people, was always mentoring and coaching young folks, and actually gave one of her businesses to her employees because she was like, I can't handle 3 anymore. I'm just going to run 2. But that level of generosity, where her employees, where her friends, dined with, stayed in her home when they were in town. So this notion that you can have this extraordinary wealth, but her belief that she couldn't give it away fast enough, and she was always giving, but also always receiving. I don't know if that's helpful for anyone else to hear, but I always loved hearing her tell that story.
Oh, and it just makes me think of, like, if there's a posture tied to what I'm scheming, what I'm even hearing in that, it's like it's hands open or like fists clenched.
Right.
And like,
Right.
which posture do we have? I think that's what Jesus is inviting this rich young man. What's your posture around your money? Is it this or is it this? And the woman you just described, it's very much an openness. And what I think is most fascinating about these postures, this posture is both giving and receiving.
That's right.
This posture is keeping and fighting. So I think there's just something about that. And to me, that's what giving up is. Lent, why do we give something up? Because it actually opens me up to receive. What is Jesus offering in this challenge to the rich young man to give up? It's actually to receive. So that those are, I basically spoiled the sermon in this video, but hey, it's going to be fun. I always end up with something fun on the day of.
Yeah. It's never spoiled. I wanted to just add this embodied piece. I think without even thinking about it, our hands are open, like at rest, right? We don't
Ooh,
need energy. But when we are holding on, that's exhausting. It takes a lot of energy.
yeah.
It's not our natural way of being. So I think there's something in that embodied practice as well, that we were built naturally to have our
Yeah.
hands open to receive and
Ooh,
give. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
We
It's a
just got a whole
beautiful.
sermon on hands right there we just preached. This is good.
We did, we did. So you're going to be in town. You're going to be live and in
I will
person.
be in the
So
room. Yep, I've got
in
some
the room.
things I'm scheming. It's going to be fun. So if you're in the area, I'd love to see people. But if you're online,
Are
I'll
you?
definitely be staring into that camera to look all of you online congregants in the eye as much as possible during worship as well. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a tremendous amount of fun. I wonder if there's any dirt involved. If we need to let the
Not
buildings
this
and
time,
grounds people.
but I might have choir members pretending to be geese. We'll see.
Ooh, oh, that's going to be really nice. I'm going to be sorry to miss it, but I'm going to look at the video. I'm going to definitely
All right,
look
it'll
at the
be good.
video.
It'll be good. Well,
It will be.
everyone watching,
So if you
listening, as
are
always, what?
I was just going to say, if you are virtual but you're close enough, this could be a great Sunday to come in and see Reverend Jim in person. But if not, seeing him on screen will be just as delicious and wonderful. And we're going to really look forward to celebrating the first Sunday in Lent with you. Love poured out.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, everybody, you know what to do. Leave your questions, comments, all the things. How are you exploring this text? What has this conversation stirred up in you? Give me more ideas for the sermon, please. Just do it before February 18th so I can add them in. And then we'll be back next week for more of these. They're just going to keep happening at least until we get to the summer. So more to come. Lent, we'll keep Lenting, and we will see you on the next one.